Hi everyone, it's Michael, and it's time for the May 2022 Orchid Collection Update. Now, as I've been discussing for the past few Orchid Collection Update videos, I have just taken my orchids through a very radical transition from semi-hydroponic grow setups to classic grow medium setups like sphagnum moss or bark. And the results have been predominantly positive. In fact, I might even say that they're exclusively positive. There are, however, some drawbacks, and the drawbacks are not from the transition, but from me and my contributions because they've been variable and highly inconsistent. Now, I would say that the biggest paradigm shift between growing in semi-hydro to classic grow medium is I cannot overlook these plants without them suffering tremendously and quickly. So with semi-hydroponics, I could perhaps overlook a plant for maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And because it has that beautiful water reservoir and it's able to self-sustain, it could kind of figure out its own coping methodologies in lieu of present conscious care for me. But in classic grow medium, particularly with additional ventilation, which to be fair has helped the roots explode and expand in growth, they dry out really quickly, they desiccate very quickly, and they start to suffer consequences very quickly. So I would say that in this current setup, if I'm not giving these plants very conscious attention every 2 to 3 days, I see negative impacts quickly. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, but I lean perhaps an unfair amount on my husband for support with the orchid care because I am traveling all the time for work, and my schedule is so highly variable, but his schedule's gotten really busy too lately. So I'm really seeing the impact of what these plants are doing independently when neither of us can care for them, and that is just not great. I know some of you must be watching being like, well, of course that's terrible. Now, as I discussed last month, I am open to the possibility of incorporating sphagnum moss into the grow mix to make them more moisture retentive and make them a little bit more independent, because really it's the dry out that's adversely impacting them. But the challenge, again, is that a lot of these plants have seen a tremendous amount of transition. And when a plant is going to be, if its grow methodology is going to be shifted in any way, shape, or form, the plant should be relatively vigorous, happy, and healthy going into that transition. You want a healthy, vigorous plant so that it adapts readily to the new system. If you have a desiccated, wilted, sad plant, it's not going to excel in a new grow method, even if it is the right method, because it doesn't have the energy it needs to really invest in adapting. And I wanted to show you a quick example of this. So I grabbed number 51. This is one of my Wedding Day Phalaenopsis orchids. This has been one of the most consistent bloomers in my collection. And just take a look at this. Do you see how terribly wilted the leaves are? Now what I did here, if you take a look, you can see that I've added sphagnum moss to the grow mix because I saw that it wasn't quite doing what it needed to do. The leaves were getting super desiccated and really, really dried out and pruned quickly. So I thought, let me just quickly readjust. But I had only repotted it maybe a month prior. And by virtue of doing that back to back, you can see the impact. The roots, even though the roots are still viable and still processing water, it continues to dry out very, very quickly. And it hasn't put down a new root system to really offset that impact. You can see it's beginning to, if I take you in right to the crown of the plant, do you see right along the base here, there is a new root coming in. But it's gonna be some time before that plant, before that root is actually capable of metabolizing water, leveraging the ambient humidity. It's gonna take some time before that is a fully functioning root. So my fear now is if I do go through the plants that have only just recently been repotted into classic medium and start changing up their potting arrangement and adding sphagnum moss, my fear is that it's gonna shock them and they will tank. So that is all to say that I'm hesitating to implement any further changes until the plants have an opportunity to really acclimate, but I'm also unsure that they'll acclimate without regular and vigilant supervision. So forgive me, I know I've been super chatty. I'm just trying to help you understand my thought process about what is inviting me to, facilitate change and what is actually kind of stopping me dead in my tracks. Now that all sounds very foreboding. The plants are doing quite well, generally speaking, but they can be doing a lot better. And we'll talk about that more specifically. Regarding my grow system, I'm doing the same thing I was doing last month. So I am continuing to flush all of the orchid containers once to twice a month. In between that, I'm watering with a dilute nutrient solution of Dynagrow and CalMag. and I am sustaining a strong source of moving air with the overhead fan. I have significantly reduced the amount of time that I leave that on because I don't want the plants to dry out anymore. And I also have my humidifier running at all times, assuming, of course, that my husband and I are attentive enough to keep it filled. So having said all of that, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the plants that have something new, different, or interesting happening this month. Jumping in with number 3 in the collection, we have my Wilsonara Aloha Sparks, which is currently giving me the most stunning double spike. But I do have some concerns because, as I mentioned, this is desiccation station. Look at these shriveled pseudobulbs. Now, this one in particular, if I do not pay attention to this one for a period of 2 to 3 days, it prunes up so quickly. It suffers very, very fast. And it's peculiar because it bounces back to an extent. I have actually been soaking the potting medium to make sure it gets really, really good and saturated. But even so, it seems to be losing its bounce back. It seems to be taking longer and longer for those bulbs to reinflate each time I overlook it. And when I say overlook it, I'm not even talking about for a very long time. I'm talking about maybe 6 days. So this one definitely needs some additional moisture. And I am not quite sure what the appropriate timing is to implement that change without really shocking this plant further. Now moving on to number 11 in the collection. This is, of course, my Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos. And what an absolute joy it is to report that there is nothing wrong with this plant. Those sequential buds have reactivated after a period of short dormancy. When I converted this to classic bark medium, the 3 existing flower spikes it had stopped blooming for a short period of time, but they are back up, they are running again. The root system is doing phenomenally, and the mottling on the leaves has never been more vivid. This plant has just been so incredibly resilient across every change I've implemented with my cultivation style. So what a gift. Thank you for being here. I love this plant. Now moving on to number 16 in the collection. This is my Dapper Nicolai Tavares, and we are gonna have a conversation about what's going on with my catasetum types today because I have 3 plants in such different stages of growth and different states of health. So this one, I would venture to say, is doing terribly. I don't know if you can tell, but this part right here was the new growth, which has since died off completely. And why? Because I watered too early, which is surprising because this plant, when I started resuming watering, its new growth had roots that were about 3 inches long, which has, in all of the years I've had this plant, been plenty sufficient. But it really caused rot and decay at the site of the new growth, and it prompted the canes that are existing to create these keikis. Now the challenge is it's not going to produce another growth from the base. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I really do believe that these keikis are the best bet for survival for this plant. But the challenge is these keikis do not have energy independently to grow by themselves. They need to remain attached to those pseudobulbs in order to really invest in their growth. And that will probably suck all of the life force out of the cane itself as it nurtures the new growth. So what I think I'm going to do is unpot this, repot it so that this is making appropriate contact with the medium, wait until those roots are approximately 4 to 5 inches long, and then I will slowly reintroduce water to the equation and hope that the plant doesn't completely die in the process. It would break my heart, but you know what? It's a learning curve. It's never happened with this plant for me before, so I'm not quite sure what the difference is, but it is very, very peculiar that it happened. And that's particularly interesting considering that the other catasetum types I have are doing absolutely remarkably well. So we'll talk about those shortly, but I just wanted to give you a little preview. Jumping now to number 19 and 20 in the collection, this is my Bulba Film Fascinator and my Bulba Film Ambrosia. And actually the Ambrosia is represented here and here. This one is in classic bark medium, this one is in water culture. Now these plants in particular have been transitioned in terms of their cultivation method so many times. They've been in basket culture, they've been in semihydro, they've been in water culture, they're now in bark. And they're just not responding to anything, period. That's not surprising. They do require around 70% humidity, and I'm just not giving it to them. I do have something on the way I just ordered, which I'm really excited to showcase next month. I'm hoping it can help offset the impact, and I've heard really good things about it from fellow growers. But right now, I just feel like I really want to scrap my Bulba Film collection and just start new because, like I said in the beginning of this video, these plants are fatigued. They have been transitioned too many times and they just do not even have the energy to accept the right grow method, let alone the wrong one. So I'm just gonna keep trying and see where this carries us. Now, another peculiar character this month is number 21 in the collection. This is my Paphiopedlum Pinocchio Laui hybrid. And the interesting thing about this one is it is a perfect reflection of the benefit afforded from changing its grow method. Now, this one has seen a lot of grow methods too. This one was in Semihydro, then it was in the PET method. But in this grow method, its root system has expanded to a place that I've never seen it before. Look at how vigorous these roots are. I mean, they are just coming out from every single place they can. And it established very quickly because it desperately needed that additional aeration afforded by this method. Now, the challenge is this is a water-loving plant. If I do not pay attention to this one for 1 to 2 days, it really sees some terrible dieback, and you can see that happening on the leaves here. And it's super unfortunate because it finally has the expansive root system that it needs to excel, but it's just not getting the moisture that it needs. So this is telling me that I'm on the right track, but I'm not quite there. Still so interesting to see this progress. Moving on to number 29 in the collection, this is my Ulafia petersai, and it has just never done better. I got it switched to a full succulent mix, and with that additional aeration and drainage, it is just putting out such a sizable growth. And I am so pleased to see that. You know, I don't know that this plant is ever going to bloom for me indoors. I've had it now for years. And the challenge with it is it really needs a lot of sun. But even so, its root system has grown more than I've ever seen before in this cultivation method. It's giving me a larger growth than I've ever seen before in this grow method. So never say never. I'm going to keep watching this one, but it is quite an interesting journey. Now moving on to number 36 in the collection. This is my Fred Clark Yara After Dark SVO Black Pearl. And the reason I'm starting wide and then coming in close is to give you a sense of how large this plant is. It is huge. And when you see the size of my hand, look at that leaf. It is gigantic. Now, this is why it is so peculiar that number 16 has struggled so intensely, because the same indicators that I used to determine when to resume watering with this one were the exact same ones I used for this one. It just happened to do much better this year. And you can see it is so fleshy and leafy and robust and vigorous, and it is just drinking down its water reservoir so quickly. Let me take you in so you can see the root system too, because it is just going absolutely bonkers in the container. Look at that. It is doing such a great job using its water. It really enjoys being in sphagnum moss. It really appreciates the additional respiration from the slits in the pot. So I am just so pleased to see how this is going, and I really hope it sustains this momentum. And last but certainly not least, I'm gonna take you in to see my Clawesia Rebecca Northern Maccabi. And this is, again, one of my catasetum types, and it is doing quite well. So you can see this new growth coming in, so cute. And you can see its root system really beginning to expand within the container. And that's exactly what you look for. So again, I tend to wait for the root system to show me that it's at around 3 to 5 inches long before I resume watering. Now what I'm doing with this one is I have already started watering, but all I'm doing is misting the sphagnum moss lightly when I mist the plants in the morning. I'm not saturating the sphagnum moss fully with water. And I think that is the main distinction between what is happening here and what is happening with number 16, because having such a long rapport with this plant, I felt confident that I knew that it was ready for water, so I just saturated it. But I think if I had slowly reintroduced water into the equation, it wouldn't have gone quite so sideways. So I'm gonna continue doing that for a period of time until I see those roots in the container really expanding in a more meaningful way, because then I'll know it's prepared to really accept water and metabolize and use the nutrients that are represented in the grow container. So also on a really good path, looking forward to seeing how this one progresses. And with that, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much as always for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. Be sure to support one another in the comment section because I'm so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. Mwah! Bye, friends.